It's the eve of Nigeria's 64th anniversary, and tensions are rising in certain parts, while others seem very unexcited about the Independence Day celebrations, with the presidency celebrating it low-key. There have also been talks of protests, and that'll be one of our conversations this morning. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on Breakfast Central. I'm Olive Emodi.
And I am Osaogie Ogbawan. Yes, Nigeria celebrates its 64th Independence Day tomorrow, Tuesday. The federal government has, of course, declared public holidays tomorrow to celebrate its Independence Day. But just like Olive has mentioned, it will be low-key celebrations. And one thing that you should pick up from that is that in the last roughly 4 or 5 years, we've had repeated low-key celebrations. Former President Muhammadu Buhari in 2015, I think in 2016, arguably in 2017 as well, also celebrated the Independence Day in a low-key manner. Mostly just saying, that in the last couple of years, there hasn't been, the very best mood across the country to push for celebrations. And once again, we're repeating the same thing in 2024. So do you expect that in the next 1 year, in the next 2 years, Nigeria will be able to have a true and complete celebration of its Independence Day and its Democracy Day, amongst other things, in the country? And, for me, the question really is, how much has improved in the last couple of years since the Buhari administration came into office? And if we've repeatedly had low-key celebrations, it really just says that the presidency understands the mood across the country and understands that there's not much that Nigerians want to see celebrated. There's not much also partying that the Nigerian people want to see.
I mean, it's not like they don't even want to see partying. They can't even afford the partying. I remember back in the day how Independence Day celebrations were. We would see students, young people, pupils, going to the stadium, marching in the different school uniforms, traditional attires. There was just a sense of joy. And typically, even in the more recent, maybe past 5 years, we'll see young pupils and students having their cultural day, showcasing their different cultures. I don't know what the mood is going to be like tomorrow, because the parents of these children can't even afford to pay for their school fees. For a number of them, we've been talking about how in Lagos State, for example, school fees increased from 35,000 naira to 100,000 naira fees, boarding fees. And the parents complained about it, saying that they were notified just 1 day to resumption. So the mood isn't the best all across the country. So yeah, one wonders what the mood, what the interpretation of Nigeria's independence will be tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, besides, school children, which you've clearly, mentioned, and I remember back then, in junior and secondary school, many years ago, it used to be a thing, that Independence Day, we moved to the stadium in Edo State back then, do a march past. Every school came out, celebrating Nigeria's Independence Day. And it wasn't perfect then. But, the point that I, was trying to make is that in the last at least 6-7 years, we seem to have repeated statements from the government every Independence Day, every year, saying that they're going to celebrate it low-key because they understand the mood across the country. And it simply means that since 2015, 2016, 2017, all the way to 2024, we've not seen any improvement in the quality of life or the quality of governance that Nigerians have gotten to experience. And that's why they continue to celebrate it low-key. We've had enough time, to be able to at least build our country in the last 64 years. And it's sad that 64 years after independence, this is where we are.
Right.
I mean, generally in every, with every metric that you can use to rate the growth of a country, it is sad. There are certain things that you can point to and say, yes, Nigeria has been successful in this regard, here or there, we've been able to grow here or there. But, arguably, we have disappointed ourselves.
I mean, the
as a
first
country.
thing that stares you in the face when you think about whether a nation has progressed or not is the citizens, first of all, their ability to fend for themselves, looking across board. And that's not something that we've seen that has come very easily to Nigerian citizens. The quality of life has reduced, the cost of living has increased, and people's spending and purchasing power has strongly reduced. So it's actually not a picture that makes sense. Speaking about, building and how far we've come, we were just talking about this before we got on the show this morning, about the video that Dan Bello posted in, well, he didn't specify what state, in northern Nigeria, of how he rebuilded, he renovated a classroom to the tune of 4.1 million naira.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, because part of the argument, we've seen a lot of reactions ever since that video came out, the classes were dilapidated. They were terrible. They were leaking. They had no fans. But he's turned it into a standard modern classroom.
Yeah.
One for 4.1 million naira.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll get to Dambelo in a few seconds, but just to once again reiterate, that 64 years after, we still don't necessarily have a democracy that we are really, really proud of. Our electoral system, is arguably still, I don't want to say it's in shambles, but it's still nothing that Nigerians, are happy with. Same thing with our courts, same thing with our National Assembly, same thing with governance generally. And now for Dambelo. Dambelo is a content creator and also a teacher in China, I believe. And if you followed his social media content, in the last couple of months or maybe years, he's been able to try to express the quality of education that he witnesses being given to young kids in China, and what he expects or he wishes that the Nigerian government would provide to young kids in Nigeria. And it's the most basic things. He's not, when you listen to him, he's not even asking for too much. He's really just sharing this is the way that the educational system works here. And these are the simple things that they'll be able to provide for these kids, to be able to start them up, at that age. And then, of course, expecting that or hoping that the Nigerian government will see these things as a model, as a standard with which we can help the young kids here in Nigeria. But of course, that's not what's happening. He renovated that school, and the key point in the renovation of that school is not how pretty it was or how good it is to renovate schools. It is the costs. 4.1 million. And the reason that was highlighted by almost everybody who commented on it is every single time that you hear about the cost of carrying out projects in Nigeria, averagely, it runs into billions. And we're talking about 5-kilometer roads, 3-kilometer roads, bridges, libraries, anything that you hear about is in billions. Same thing with when you hear about government corruption. The former Kogi State governor has been accused of 80 billion naira fraud.
So
the cost of corruption,
too. About 9 billion naira.
So the cost of corruption really, when you hear about these billions, so you imagine the amount of work that those funds would have been able to do in these states if they weren't mismanaged. And that really is the point. 4.1 million only. This is maybe 30% of the average senator's salary every month.
So, anyway, when I think about it, it just reminds me again of the sheer wickedness, again, of Nigerian politicians. Because if you can use 4.1 million to guarantee a decent class, imagine what the monies that have been stolen will do for not just one school, but for many schools in Nigeria. We'll keep talking about this even as the number of out-of-school children are on the rise. But let's share with you our top stories for the day and then share with you breakfast headlines. Activists mobilized for October 1st protests and the least demands. We'll still be talking about this. Some have termed it End Bad Governance protest too. Some have called it fearless in October. And the drama in Edo State continues. Edo warns of Shaibu's alleged government house invasion. Nigeria's unemployment rate hits 5.3% in Q1 2024, according to the nation's Bureau of Statistics. Nigeria marks 64th independence with National Church Service. And away from that, the newspaper front pages will be reviewed as usual with our guests and with you when we open the phone lines. And now let's bring you breakfast headlines.
Well, let's begin breakfast headlines by telling you that Christian faithful across Nigeria gathered in Nigeria's federal capital, Abuja, for the interdenominational service of Nigeria's 64th independence anniversary celebration. In attendance were senior government officials, service chiefs, and Nigerians across several denominations. President Bola Tinubu has hinted at an imminent cabinet reshuffle and may do so on or before the 1st of October, according to his special advisor on information and strategy, Bayo Onanuga. This means that some ministers are expected to be dropped, while others may be moved to other ministries. The Nigerian leader appointed 45 ministers in August 2023 out of the 48 he had sent to the Senate. And now to politics. The Minister of the Federal Capital Territory, FCT, Nyesom Wike, has mocked supporters of Governor Sim Fubara, who defected from the People's Democratic Party, PDP, to the All Progressives Congress, or All People's Party, I beg your pardon, APP, ahead of the October 5th local government election. after Wike's loyalists took control of the PDP in Rivers following the Congress that held last month. Fubara reportedly directed his loyalists to contest the forthcoming election under APP. Now to health matters, the Kano State's Governor Abba Yusuf on Sunday restated the state's government's commitment to end polio and other childhood communicable diseases as it collaborates with partners to target 3.6 million children in the state. He made the pledge in Kano while unveiling the 2024 polio eradication campaign in Dawakin Kudu local government area of the state. Away from Nigeria now to East Africa, the health ministry in Rwanda has confirmed the death of 6 people from an outbreak of Marburg virus, a highly infectious hemorrhagic fever similar to Ebola. The highly virulent microbe causes severe fever, often accompanied by bleeding and organ failure. According to Health Minister Sabin Nsanzimana, some 20 patients were being treated for the illness. In Southern Africa, presidential candidates from Botswana's different political parties have submitted their nominations to Chief Justice Terence T. Ranawani of the High Court in Gaborone ahead of the general elections set for October 30. President Masisi, who is standing for a second 5-year term, said that October 30 and 31st would be public holidays to allow people to vote in large numbers. And that's all on Breakfast Headlines. Let's head back to Breakfast Central and get into our top stories. I am Osaogi Ogbon.
Welcome back. Top government officials in Nigeria have expressed optimism over the future of the country, saying that they are hopeful Nigeria will be better. This was as they converged on the National Christian Center, Abuja, as part of activities for Nigeria's 64th Independence Anniversary celebration. News Central's Joshua Imarayi reports.
The interdenominational service in commemoration of Nigeria's 64th Independence Anniversary celebration holding in the nation's capital, Abuja. In attendance were past leaders, senior government officials and officers of the Nigerian Armed Forces and Paramilitary Corps. In their addresses, officials present expressed optimism over the country's future.
This mandate is for 4 years. We have done only 1 year. Is it 4 months? There is hope. I have a dream too, that this country, and that's what is going to be the most blessed, the most successful, the most prosperous in Africa and the world.
We know that growth does not come without challenges. Our journey of transformation is akin to the pains of childbirth. The process is very uncomfortable, sometimes very painful. But we know that joy of what we are bringing to life will far exceed the pains of today.
The highlight of the service was the cutting of the 64th anniversary cake. The message of hope and resilience resonated among the congregation, as many say they are hopeful of better days ahead. In Abuja for News Central, I am Joshua Imarayi.
Congratulations to us as we celebrate our 64th year being independent in Nigeria. Osaki, you were asking a very important question when the package was playing. Would you like to ask?
Yeah, I mean, I was asking, I didn't get to see the unity fabric right there. I thought it was going to be, a good time to wear it.
Okay, I probably didn't. I know it's a green and white fabric. I think I saw a fabric that looked quite like it.
I didn't notice it. They maybe haven't, done a mass production of the fabric yet, or made it a thing that must be worn in national events, but like you said when we started the program this morning, It's the same lines, the same script that, were used in 2015 or 2016 or even 2012 that are still being used in 2024. The whole idea of, going through pains, and, the future is bright and endure and some of all these things. Those are things that have been said for the last decade or more. And so it seems like self-deceit as a country. 64 years later, if you're still saying the same things, decade after decade, mostly because, we still have not been able to actually address the core issues in Nigeria. If we still, have defects in our electoral system, the whole leadership recruitment process is still very, very faulty. If we still have, a failure to hold our leaders to account, there's so many very, very core issues, issues with our constitution, that if these things aren't sorted out, in 2025, we're very likely going to, come together again and have the same speech, the same script, the same Nigeria is going through pains and everybody should, work towards the building of a better future for Nigeria. The same thing.
It's kind of the same feeling that Nigerians have when we're celebrating Democracy Day, which was initially the 29th of March and now the 12th of June. It's that same feeling, and it feels like there's a copy and paste script that is being read on those days, maybe just tweaked here and there. Democracy Day this year was the same sense. Nigerians were asking, what really is democratic in our democratic process? What is the democracy in Nigeria's form of democracy? And there were questions as to if democracy is a viable form or is a sustainable form of government for us, or a practical, logical form of government for us, because the democracy that democracy was defined as is not what Nigerians are experiencing. And where there's a slight, deviation from the democratic process, the only body that you would trust that can restore things back to factory settings will be the courts. And Nigerians have lost faith in the court system to be able to guarantee us that democracy. So it's just really being between the devil and the deep blue sea. That's what it feels like in these days.
It has arguably gotten worse over time. And let's be clear, it is not restricted to Nigeria.
No, it's not.
Governance and politics across the world has gotten worse over time. The veil has obviously, I think the positive part is that the veil has been removed from the eyes of millions of people across the world to realize that their governments, that have been lying to them for many, many years, are just complete liars. They're betrayers. This is not restricted to Nigeria, but we will speak for the Nigerian perspective. I think just to correct your dates there, Democracy Day was moved from May 29 to June 12th.
That's what I said.
I think you got it wrong. What you said.
I said.
But anyway, the point is, you're very, very correct. And it's the same thing with our Independence Day, which we're going to be celebrating tomorrow. My points are, you will almost repeat the same thing year after year and year after year if you do not take conscious effort to actually fix what must be fixed. And let's not be deceived that those who are in government today do not understand the things that must be fixed to have a better Nigeria. They are very much aware. The reason that they just wouldn't take those steps, if we're talking about a constitutional review to ensure that we actually have a constitution that works for Nigeria, they're very much aware. Whether they will take those steps or not is left to them. And it's left for the Nigerian people to ensure that you push until they take those steps. Because
why they won't take those steps is because the current flaws that exist in our governance favor a certain set. That is, of course, the political set. They can benefit from it. They can manipulate the system to suit their own selfish agenda. So it's why they will probably not do what they need to do. But these are conversations that still continue even as we count down the hours to Nigeria's Independence Day. Nigeria is set to mark its 64th year as an independent nation tomorrow. And the 1st of October, of course, is this year's celebration, but it is coming with more drama than we have seen in the past few years. While President Tinubu has asked for a low-key Independence Day celebration, the voices of protesters who have planned to begin a nationwide protest on the same day may not bring the president's request to realization.
Now, the Take It Back movement has said that the FCT protest will hold at the Eagles Square, the same venue of the Independence Day parade. Protesters are speaking up against the economic hardship in the nation attributed by fuel price hikes, increased electricity tariffs, and inflation. Joining us now is activist and member of the Democratic Socialist Movement, Hassan Taiwo Soweto. Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, good morning and thanks for having me.
All right. Let's, of course, start with, you know, the necessity of a protest again, right after the End Bad Governance protest. Why would you say that this one is very, very needed for Nigerians, especially on Independence Day?
It's very obvious why it's needed. Despite 10 days of protest in August, despite 40 people killed, despite over 2,100 in police and prison detention across the country, President Tinubu continues to ignore the cry of Nigerians for the hunger and hardship in the land, to be addressed. Rather, the government has continued to even intensify the anti-poor and neoliberal policies that have thrown Nigerian people into a condition of poverty and misery. And that's why between August and now, you have seen over 300% increase in the price of petroleum products. Aside that, the president himself has continued to use the collective resources of this country to take care of himself and the first family. So that just immediately after our protest in August, you've seen the president buy himself a new vehicle, a luxurious vehicle. You have seen the private jet that he's using, something which shows that while he has us to tighten our belts, he continues to use the collective resources of this country to enrich himself and his family. And it's not just the presidency, the National Assembly members are doing the same, the ministers are doing the same, the 36 state governors and House of Assembly members are doing the same. Nigeria has been turned into the private banks of 1% of the population, who continues to loot our resources into their own pocket while leaving the rest of us wallowing in poverty. And that is why we think that we have to go back to the street again tomorrow to highlight all of these issues. But also, tomorrow is also to protest the continued incarceration of thousands of our people who protested in August last month. Don't forget that about 11 of them, Adaramoye Michael Lenny, Mosio Sodiq, Angel Love, Daniel Akande, and others are being tried for treason just because they participated in the protest calling for an end to bad governance. We think that tomorrow should be a day of solidarity with those who are being tried falsely because they stood for the rest of us. Tomorrow is a day to demand that protest is not treason. Because what we are seeing now is that 64 years after independence, not only is our economy not favoring the interests of the ordinary Nigerian people, but also all pretense at democracy has now been discarded. Civil rule has been replaced by civilian dictatorship, democracy has been replaced by tyranny, and protest has become treason. We have to use tomorrow to highlight the fact that Nigerians are still slaves in their own country, 64 years after independence, and we are demanding an end to all of this.
You've talked about standing behind protesters, especially the ones that have been detained, and to insist that protest is not treason. Do you see maybe, or do you envisage that there might be more arrests made and more people who will be made to face further charges of treason after this protest tomorrow?
Yes, we are hoping that the Nigerian government would have learned its lesson, because what has happened since August is that we have been able to demonstrate very clearly that nothing will stop the Nigerian people in the struggle to liberate themselves. And that is why, despite the arrests in August, despite the killings, Nigerians continue to say that the demand for an end to hunger, for an end to poverty, cannot be stopped by anything. So I hope the government has learned its lesson. But if they have not, if they still decide to go ahead tomorrow to arrest people for demanding that the condition of hunger should be addressed, then so be it, because the reality is that for the Nigerian people, we are actually between the devil and the deep blue sea. If we don't come out to protest because of fear of arrest, then we are going to remain at home with the risk that poverty and hunger would eventually end our lives. Look at how many people are committing suicide in Lagos and other parts of the country today because of the desperate condition. So we really have got no choice, and that is why people are still going to come out tomorrow, whatever the government or the security agencies wants to do. Maybe this time around, the government will do better by actually beginning to address the demands. But if they don't, this struggle to end bad governance can never be stopped by any intimidation.
I want to go back again. I want to go back again to something that you said. You said that maybe this time the government will do better. We've had the first End Bad Governance protest. We saw how it turned out, how people are now facing charges of treason. How is this protest different from the first protest? And, what metrics are you putting in place? Or are there any measures that will be put in place to ensure that, this is getting the results that you want from the government, seeing as some would argue that the first protest didn't get the results that it was intended to get?
Well, this protest that we are planning for tomorrow is actually a continuation of the End Bad Governance protest of August. So it's a continuum, because we recognize that to end bad governance, you must have a process of a resistance that goes from protest on these different issues, but also that also leads, to solutions that can ensure that, the ultimate reality of having good governance is realized in this country. So what that means, therefore, is that it's a long process, and the protest will continue and graduate from one form of resistance to another. However, we have to be clear about this when we are talking about the success or otherwise of August protests. We have to be clear that protests on its own do not guarantee success. What guarantees success is the character of the government in place, whether they are ready to listen to the people, whether they're a government that is sensitive to the interests and yearnings of the people. And what we have seen with the Tinubu government is that it's a government that is impervious to criticism. It's a government that responds to agitations, to demands and cries, for the problems that face the people to be addressed. It's the government that responds, with the hammer, that responds with repression, that responds with the bullet and prison. So what that therefore means is that as we are going on with this resistance, the government is making it inevitable that the Nigerian people would have to do what ultimately they have to do to ensure that they defend their interest, to ensure that they salvage their country from the clutches of the capitalist vampires who have taken it to ransom. But the government also have a chance to prevent the situation getting to that level by ensuring that right from tomorrow, the demands that we are making, that we begin to see that they are being addressed. So it is not actually protesters who should be asked about the effectiveness or otherwise of their protest. If protests have been held and government does not respond, I think that it's government that should be blamed for the lack of result when it comes to that. As for what we are going to do differently tomorrow, we have to make it very clear that unlike August, where the government went to secure Jakarta court judgment to try and restrict protesters to so-called designated places, what we are going to have tomorrow is a people's parliament on the street. We are marching all around Lagos, and we are going to be having people's parliament from junction to junction. We want to have conversations with the poor and hungry Nigerians and Lagosians about how they are surviving under 1.5 years of Tinubu's government. We also want to have conversations with Lagosians about what we can do to continue the struggle to end bad governance. So we are not going to be restricted to one place, and we are calling on the new commissioner of police, not to allow himself to be utilized to muzzle the rights of the Nigerian people. Whatever the security forces want to do, we are not going to stop. October 1st protest is unstoppable. It is going to happen tomorrow, 7:30 a.m. The starting point is Ikeja under bridge, and we are marching all over Lagos State. Nothing can stop the people.
All right. I mean, you probably need to be clear on who we call or who you say is we here, because I don't know that, you currently have the same support and the same interest in protest as it was in August. So do you think that Nigerians across the country, not just in Ikeja, but across the country, are fully behind the calls for protest tomorrow?
Why wouldn't they be? You have
but
to
are
ask
they?
yourself.
I mean, maybe you expect that they should be, but do you see that you have the same level of followership and interest in the protest tomorrow?
There's no followership in struggle. It's not a chieftaincy affair. Struggle is a festival of the oppressed and is a product of the fact that situations have become intolerable. Look at the data and statistics of the socio-economic condition of the Nigerian people. Nigerians are poor rather than they were 1 year ago. Insecurity situation across the country.
Yeah,
so inevitably,
here's the point that I'm making.
People will be in support of a protest to make their lives better. If people don't come out effectively for a protest, it's not because they do not support it. It could only be because the government utilize fear and intimidation to keep people from coming out. That was what they tried to do in August. But I'm sure that Nigerian people have lost their fear of the regime, and they are going to come out anytime they are called out to fight for themselves. It's a fight for our life. We have got no choice but to march out on the streets. That's the reality.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm trying to, express here, or rather try to be sure of, is, how much real, I mean, a protest without numbers, would almost have no effect. I'm sure that both of us know that. If you do not have people actually come out, in solidarity with your demands and all of that, you almost will have, you probably would have 5 people holding a placard somewhere, and the government is, is probably going to see that as a joke. So that's what I'm trying to, find out, that are you certain that you would have Nigerians actually come out? But let's look at the demands that you have. There's about 10 of them that I've seen, published online. It says here, say no to the IMF neoliberal policies, reverse hike in fuel price and electricity tariff, end insecurity, banditry, terrorism, implement 70,000 naira minimum wage, just a couple of them. It says here, genuine electoral reforms, massive investment in public works and social infrastructure, immediate prosecution and jailing of all corrupt politicians, judges, police. Do you see these things as things that are achievable just, after a protest? The government immediately starts to jail and prosecute corrupt government officials, immediately carries out electoral reforms and some of all these things. How do you expect that it would work with your demands?
See, let's be clear to ourselves that if any government wishes to do right in this country, it shouldn't take a long time. Because just look at what has happened since August. The Ember governance protesters that were arrested and are being tried for treason, how long did it take the government? How long did it take the Attorney General and the police to file cases against them? But look at the case of Yahaya Bello. Look at other cases of corruptors, in this country over the decades. How it takes the government, decades before they can even get people to the docks. And then after that, they do plea bargaining and people go home with billions of looted funds. What should be clear to us, really, is that it is only when it comes to the interest of the working people that governance becomes difficult, that politicians now tell you that you have to wait for a long time because things don't happen immediately. But when it comes to their own interest, when it comes to protecting themselves and the corrupt looters, it doesn't take so much. So for us as Nigerian people, we must begin to see through these lies. Governance is not something. It's not something that is too difficult. Once there is the, political will to do what is right, and there's a clear program of what needs to be done. But even beyond this is the fact that, the fact that this government is running a socioeconomic system that is already calibrated to return the same result of poverty in the midst of plenty, also is a factor in the way and manner the government has not been able to address the protesters' demands. Because look at it, for instance, we are demanding that all IMF, World Bank policies should be reversed. Why the government has not responded to that kind of demand is ideological. It is because ideologically they agree that only IMF neoliberal policies that leads to the enrichment of a few at the detriment of the mass majority is the only pathway for economic prosperity and development for Nigeria. So what I therefore miss is that if we have a new government in Nigeria today that operates under a pro-people's socialist ideology, we are going to realize that all of these demands that we are making cannot take the government more than a few weeks, to respond to and begin to implement. So it's ultimately a question of not just those people in power, but also the kind of socioeconomic system that is being practiced. And that is why for the Ember governance protesters and the Nigerian people, we have to take our struggle from just making these demands and that demand to actually, begin to build a political party of the oppressed people, of the workers and youth, to be able, to end capitalism and put in power a workers and poor people's government under a socialist program that can make life better for the Nigerian people. Nigeria is wealthy. Don't let anybody deceive us. We are only poor because of capitalism and the corruption of the ruling elite. Once we end that, we are going to see that this land flowing with milk and honey can actually serve the interest.
Hassan Taiwo Soweto, thank you very much for joining us this morning. It's a few hours and we will see how things turn out with the October 1st protest. We're going to a quick break now, and when we come back, more conversations. Do stay with us.
The National Bureau of Statistics says the unemployment rate in Nigeria increased to 5.3% in Q1 of 2024 from the 5.0% recorded in Q3 of 2023. The Bureau said the unemployment rate was defined as the share of the labor force who were not employed but who were actively searching and were available for work. According to the report, 84% of Nigeria's working class population is self-employed, based on research from the first quarter of 2024, reflecting a decrease from the 87.3% recorded in Q3 2023. Joining us now is the principal partner, Woodridge and Scott Consulting, Segun Sokweton. Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Olive.
So we want you to help us make sense of these numbers. I think that it goes without saying that we can all understand why there's an increase in the unemployment rate. But I'm seeing the numbers here. Unemployment rate, we're seeing 5.3% unemployment rate, up from 5.0% in Q3 2023. There's the male employment, there's the female employment rate, but let's not go into that. Then there's the self-employment rate. 84% of Nigeria's working class self-employed. So if you can help us interpret what this means, how we arrived here, and what the implication of this is.
Well, first of all, I think that it bears saying. I think Osarige was saying, explaining what the unemployment numbers are, and how it has been arrived at. And I think you can't have this conversation without taking a quick glance at that. The fact that the Nigeria Bureau of Statistics considers you employed if you work for 1 hour in a week. And I think we need to let that sink in. So before we even talk about the percentage of the population that is self-employed versus, working in salary jobs, you have to understand that the NBS says that you are employed gainfully if you've worked for 1 hour. And
is that not a huge flaw in the definition of employment?
That's the problem.
There was a recalibration done a couple of years ago.
Yes, so it was August last year precisely that the NBS decided to move from defining employment as 20% per week or more to 20 hours per week or more to 1 hour per week or more. So with that recalibration and with that redefinition, unemployment figures dropped from 33% that we knew it to be as at that time to 5%. And we all said at that time that, no, this makes no sense. We all know that unemployment in Nigeria is not 5%. You can just simply do an eye test, talk to the youth around you or the people around you, not just youth. Is it true that only 5 people out of 100 Nigerians that are that can work do not have jobs? So that, first of all, needs to be said, and I think that the NBS is doing Nigeria a great disservice because what this does is that it takes the focus off the reality of our job markets, the fact that unemployment is a real problem in this economy. If you are looking at any economy and trying to determine how that economy is performing, you look at major macroeconomic indicators. You look at inflation, you look at interest rates, you look at exchange rates, you look at unemployment figures. So if your unemployment is saying unemployment is 5%, it means that everything is fine. We really don't have any problem.
Yeah, is this the same metric that is used across the world? Is it a...
Yes, they've used the ILO standard. So some countries decided to go with the new ILO standard. That standard came into operations a few years ago. But you have to understand that most countries that we would like to benchmark ourselves against, the economic structure is different. The volume of informal sector to formal sector, for example, in Nigeria, we're talking about 60% to 40%. In the United States, it's 10% of the economic activity that is resting in the informal sector. Yep. So you cannot define unemployment in Nigeria the same way you define it in the US or in the UK. The other factor to think about is that minimum wage in those places. Yep. Even if I work for 1 hour in the UK, at least I've got £6. And you can argue that, yes, £6 may not take you through the week, but £6, if you convert that to Naira, we can do the numbers. We're talking about 50,000 Naira or something like that. Yeah. So So those numbers are disparate. We cannot compare ourselves to those claims. So that bears saying. To come back to this particular survey and what it means, it would potentially suggest that things are getting better in terms of jobs. It would mean that fewer people are self-employed, that more people are getting salary jobs, and that's what we want, one would say. Is that what we want, though? Do we want people as entrepreneurs, or do we want people doing 9 to 5? That's another conversation, because you find that even the United States, the American economy is driven by entrepreneurs. So we will do better if we're able to empower the people in entrepreneurship in Nigeria for them to be more productive than they are. If we fix things like power, if we fix infrastructure, telecommunications, and all of that, so that they can contribute more to the economy as against being in 9 to 5 jobs that may not pay them enough to deal with their cost of living expenses. So that report can be interpreted either way. But I'm sure that people with a political mind would want to say, oh, this is evidence that economic
No, but
policy is
actually,
working.
I mean, I think we might be interpreting it wrong, because it says that the unemployment rate rose to 5.3%.
Sure.
From 5.0%.
Yes.
So doesn't that mean that it's gotten worse?
Well, there are two angles to that report. They spoke about the unemployment rate itself. That went up. And it's important to just bear that in mind. But first of all, for me, I think that if you say unemployment rose from, I can't remember what the figure is.
From 5.0 to 5.3%.
So we moved by 0.3%. That just tells us everything is fine. We're coasting. And I don't think that's true. So that's why I didn't really focus on that. I'm not interested in a number that I personally don't hold as being credible. But the second part of that report talks about the number of people that have transitioned from being self-employed.
So 87.3% to 84%.
Yes.
So
And
that would mean
suggest
so exactly what I wanted to ask you. Does that not interpret that a number of small businesses are not able to thrive anymore because of the current economic realities?
And I do know that, I run a consulting firm, and one of the services we provide is recruitment, headhunting services. And we've run a number of interviews in the last couple of weeks where people are saying, I had to abandon. In fact, one particular example was running a logistics business, had bikes with his wife. He's been doing it for 2 years. And then he came for this interview. He wants to be a CFO, because he's an accountant, and he had done a CFO job before he left it to pursue this dream. Now he's back, So we're speaking to him at that interview and say, oh, so what's going to happen if things pick up with your business? Won't you abandon this job you're interviewing for and all of that? So there are a lot of people like that who are leaving their businesses and going into paid employment because the businesses are not doing well as a result of the economic realities. And
I really thank you for sharing that analogy, because that would give me a framework for the next question that I want to answer. You run a number of interviews for firms. I think I would like you to share with us what the current realities are regarding employers of labor being able to match up their salary offerings with the current realities. But we'll have you answer that question when we come back from this break. Welcome back to Breakfast Central. We're still looking at the report by the NBS concerning unemployment rates in Nigeria. And we're joined by the principal partner, Woodridge and Scott Consulting, Mr. Shokwiton. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, before we went on the break, I was asking you about hiring new employees. You talked about how your organization has done a number of interviews in the past few weeks. Does the offering that the employers make, does it match the current reality?
No, they don't. The sad reality is that the employers themselves are just finding a way to survive. They're finding ways to survive. Things have been very tough for everybody. The economy is reeling, basically. Exchange rate devaluation and very high inflation is putting people in difficult positions. So what you find is that the employers are offering what they can, and the employees that are in the job market are accepting what they have to, rather than nothing. So it's a terrible situation to be in, and I think that the reality of that will be that productivity will suffer, because what you would have is, if an employee is, doing a job that he feels is inadequately compensated for, in fact, that he knows is inadequately compensated for because that compensation is actually unable to match his cost of living requirements, he will find ways to augment that income. And he's expected to dedicate a full 9 hours per day, 40-hour week. What's the number? Yeah, 40 hours per week, to that job. He can't, so he's got to hustle. He's got to have side gigs. And some of them would have to have multiple side gigs just to match up with their current living expenses realities, So it's a bad place to be as an economy because everybody loses. The employer is going to lose and the employee is losing as well.
I want us to go back to the ILO metric that you mentioned earlier. If we weren't using that ILO metric, what would our unemployment rate be? And how, maybe even dangerous is it, that the government sees its unemployment rate at just 5.3%, which, like you said earlier, I mean, it's not bad.
Exactly. So if you are the Minister of Labor and Productivity, for example, in Nigeria, you give yourself a pat in the back, because we're doing better than some G20 economies in terms of unemployment. Unemployment rates in places like France and the UK is trending at around 5%, roughly, some 6%. So we're matching up with those economies. What's the problem? Hey, what crisis? You say, crisis? What crisis? So, and I think that's the problem. So if we didn't have that recalibration, today, unemployment would probably be about 31%. Now, that would be saying that a third of our employable population is out of jobs. And then if you then do underemployment, which was also recalibrated, we'll be talking about 60% of the employable population being underemployed, which means that they are earning, they're working for hours far less than they're available to work for, Unfortunately, we have told ourselves this lie officially, and what that simply means for the policymaker is that they look to other places, for problems to solve. Unemployment is not a problem in Nigeria. That's what this means for a policymaker, and that's a big problem, because if you see it as a crisis and you see it as, then you start asking yourselves, hey, wait, we need to improve the job figures in Nigeria. What policy measures can we put in place to achieve that? What kind of incentives do we want to give employers of labor, for example, to encourage them to employ more people? Do we want to give them some sort of tax breaks if they hit some sort of threshold over the number of people they're employing or what their wage bill is, and all of that? Those are the kind of things that they do in other economies, But if we say that we're trending at 5%, then everything is fine. We don't need to think too much.
So then what then is the way out? If you say that policymakers will, based off these reports, and think that we don't have a crisis in the unemployment sector, but that's not the reality of Nigerians. Yep. And we can't base our findings on any other statistics except the one provided by the NBS. Absolutely. So what is the way out? Is it to go back to the NBS and tell them to, look through their metrics again and give different figures? Or is there really no way out of this?
Well, I think that the NBS can have a rethink. Maybe if there's any sort, we can ask the National Assembly to weigh in on this and compel the NBS to take another look at this. Majority, well, let me not say majority, many industry experts and labor-related organizations have rejected this recalibration. And I think it's important to know that, a lot of organizations that play in that sector have said, no, this new methodology is not correct and needs to be addressed. It's been a year and there hasn't been any, response from the NBS. They've moved on. So I think that maybe the National Assembly, the relevant committees, for example, can invite the NBS to come explain why they have done this and whether they do not see the dangers and, if they don't think that this should be addressed.
It's hard to just, how do you have unemployment at 5.3%, but have the highest poverty rates in the region and maybe even in the world?
Absolutely.
It's just difficult to put those two together, and it's to me, it's very dishonest. And I think I saw that, I think it was Atedo Peterside, react to it a couple of, maybe a year ago or so, saying that it just wasn't making any sense, to have poverty rising, but unemployment reducing. You know, it's not adding up.
And then
current
maybe the minister,
administration-
the Minister of Labour and Unemployment probably also has some questions
Labour
to
and
answer.
Unemployment?
Yeah, Labour and Employment. At this rate, it is what it is, really. But the Minister of Labour and Employment has a number of questions. Nkeruka Onyeji-Ocha has a number of questions to answer. You've talked about the House of Assembly and maybe the National Assembly needing to, having to look into this. But we're hoping that maybe the minister, what can the minister do about this, really?
Well, I mean, the minister will be happy about this. She's going to say to herself that I'm doing well, so she's not going to want anything done about this, and I don't want to infer any political connotations to this, but it bears remembering that this was changed in August 2023, which was just a couple of months after the new administration came on board. So was that a coincidence? Was this something that maybe the NBS had been considering even before the change of, power happened? Conjecture, I don't know, but definitely the minister will be happy with this. She would not want this changed, which is why I didn't talk about her and I talked about the National Assembly, because they report to the people supposedly. So they need to come in. There's something you said, Rosario, that I think we need to emphasize for people to understand. You cannot have poverty prevalence as high as it is in Nigeria and say that your unemployment numbers are good. They don't go hand in hand. If poverty is this high, people are unemployed. That's one of the reasons that they're poor. So there's a direct conflict in those two numbers, and the two numbers come from the same agency.
And I'm wondering what the new minimum wage, what impact the new minimum wage will have on employment and the numbers that we're seeing so far. But this still is a conversation that has to continue, and we thank you very much for joining us. And we hope we can have more conversations like this in the near future. Of course, I'm sure it will be a big conversation tomorrow, October 1st. It will be a big conversation tomorrow. But that's all that we can take for now. We've had a number of stories that we've looked at already this morning. If you're just tuning in, let's share with you a recap of the conversations we've had, and then also share with you what's coming up next on Breakfast Central. Nigeria's unemployment rate hits 5.3% in Q1 2024, according to NBS. We've talked about what this means with Mr. Soputon. Nigeria marks 64th independence with church service. It's not a good look for Nigerians so far. We've not been in the best state. Activists mobilized for October 1st protest. List demands Mr. Soweto joined us to have the conversation about what tomorrow will look like. But now let's share with you what's coming up next.
Coming up next, Edo State government warns of Shaibu's alleged government house invasion, and also the newspaper front pages, the major stories making headlines across Nigeria this Monday morning. We're also bringing you Which Way Nigeria. Stay with us.
Welcome back to Breakfast Central. It's time for us to review the newspapers. Hopefully, the papers will have stories that may bring some warmth to this very, very cold, rainy morning in Lagos, Nigeria. I'm not very optimistic, right? But we have with us public affairs analyst Theophilus Akatugba. Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here.
Good to have you.
And happy pre-independence.
Oh, thank you, and I wish you a very happy celebration of the 64th anniversary of our dear country.
Well, that's subject to multiple interpretations. But let's share with you what the front pages of the papers are saying this morning. The Punch newspaper, October 1st protest, policeman flashpoints, APC opposition clash. State police commands deploy teams, organizers insist on rally as PDP and Labour Party berate APC. Nigeria at 64, Obasanjo, Akpabio, SGF, service chiefs grace Thanksgiving service. Federal government raises teams to avert ASU strike. Police begin probe as lion kills keeper in Obasanjo library. I saw that very sad story, 35-year-old boy gone just like that. Man. Constitution amendment. Regional government tops 56 memoranda to National Assembly. Naira for crude deal begins Tuesday, Tinubu panel. 17 governors raise minimum wage panels. Cameroon Dam, NEMA crew monitors Niger and Benue rivers. I've surpassed the tractor's 8-year achievement, says Fubara. That's all on the front page of the Punch. Let's move over to another paper.
All right, the Daily Times this morning says more than 40% of Nigerians now enjoy 20 hours of power supply daily, says Adelabu. credits achievements to achievement in power sector rather to radical, bold steps taken by Tinubu administration. I think it's also important to clarify, it must be 40% of those who are metered and those who are connected to the electricity grid. It's not 40% of Nigerians. It is those who, are directly connected to Nigeria's electricity grid, I guess. All right. It says here also, oil theft, NNPC dismantles over 8,000 illegal refineries, 5,800 pipelines in 6 months. Federal government approves 350 billion naira to support dams and irrigation facilities, says Minister. Prioritizing local value addition is key to Africa's industrialization, says Alake, who is the Minister of Solid Minerals, I believe. And, in 4 years' time, I think it will be important to ask what we've achieved or what has changed really in the Ministry of Solid Minerals. What have we been able to do with regards earning more foreign exchange from solid minerals? There's always been those claims that is one sector of Nigeria that it's not ignored, but it just seems to have, how to express it? So there's a lot that we can gain from it, that it seems we turn the blind eye to it and just focus on oil. While there are certain individuals who are making money, in that sector. But we'll see. Federal government hands over 64 CNG buses to labor unions and NANS. Also, troops foil ISWAP insurgents attack, recover weapons in Borno State. That's all on the Daily Times. Let's go to the Vanguard newspapers now.
All right, on the front page of the Vanguard, October 1st, police deploy in states as organizers insist on protests. There's so many other riders to the story that we can maybe take much later. We can see there, government failed to address protesters' demands. Deji Adeyanju says, hopes more detained protesters will be released today. Refrain from any acts of violence, federal government says. These are all sub-stories to the October 1st protest. Labour accuses IOCs, mining agents, of exploiting port workers. Cement. Demand soars amidst price hikes, declining purchasing power. Serap Twinec chair. Obey judgment on electoral offences or ellipsis. Nigeria could end insecurity in 1 year if ellipsis, says Ndume. And in the world of sports, Finidi Rivers United overpower Eyimba. At the top of the paper we have over 40% of Nigerians now enjoy 20 hours of electricity, according to Power Minister. We'll resist unitarianism in Nigerian politics, says Afenifere. And final story, federal government hands over 64 CNG buses to labor unions and NAS. All right, let's start with the protests. Every paper has a big story about the protests. Police have deployed in states as organizers have insisted on protests. Your thoughts concerning the October 1st planned protests and the efficacy of the protests?
Well, my thought is that at every opportunity is good for any citizen that is aggrieved, that is unhappy with the conditions in the country to vent their opinion, to express their opinion, to amplify it as loud as possible. So October 1st, 64th years of Nigerian existence, the protesters want to speak loud and clear to government and to anyone who cares to listen that the conditions in the country are not as desired, and they are very difficult. And so I commend those who want to protest, because if you don't say anything, those who are in government might not understand. So protest is it's actually part of the artifacts of democracy, and so I believe. But as far as the efficacy, the problem I have in this country is that people think protest must be a procession. You don't necessarily have to proceed or have a procession. You can, gather in one spot and amplify your voice as loud as possible because of the risk of infiltration, which is very palpable because you have so many miscreants on our streets. If you say you have a very high poverty rate, you should expect that you have a lot of miscreants around. And so this is what has always been challenges of everyone who planned a protest. Not because protests are bad, they can be very effective, they can really drive a message both locally and internationally, and everywhere in the world. Even when you see the democratic conventions in the US, the Jews and those who support, who have an opinion, they came there to protest. But these things must be done peacefully.
Yeah, I mean,
that's what civilization is all about.
As much as, there's a reminder that it must be peaceful, talk also about the Nigerian government's response to protests, and its response to criticism. In the last long while, I mean, we saw the reactions to the End Bad Governance protest.
So the Nigerian government is a government that is undergoing very dangerous reforms. They are very conversant with the risk and the very charged atmosphere. And so everything they are doing is to avoid an escalation of chaos. So every government will play the role they are playing because they know that all these reforms, they are at the very heart of every Nigerian who want to protest because the reforms touches the very core of the economic well-being of every Nigerian. So government is just afraid of a snowballing of a protest like you found that in Bangladesh, where the president had to is it Bangladesh?
But it doesn't work.
But the protest in Egypt. So once the government is afraid of that protest, that's why you see governments doing everything to stop it.
So I mean, if you say that the reforms that they're carrying out, they're going to be very painful, and so they expect protest. Should your response then be to arrest possible protesters and charge them with treason?
Well, there are treasonable actions that can happen within a very genuine protest. That is the idea. If you raise a flag of another country, if you bogo a shop, if you cause arson, all of that can
Is that treason?
No. Listen to me. Those who carried flags and they arrested a few people and they asked questions. So the government has a lot more information. They are not arresting everyone who went out to protest, but they have picked some people and they've charged them. You're charging anybody for any crime doesn't mean that you have evidence. So it's government to now present the evidence. Government is only acting. Government agencies, the police, they have a job to do and they are trying to satisfy their paymaster. And so don't expect the police to pat you in the back when they know that they have to make a report of how many people did you arrest, how many people did you prosecute, and what will you be charging them for if not treason?
I mean, so you
protest?
randomly just pick people up, because you need to please,
no,
pay masters, and then you charge them with treason.
We know these things. We need to just defend those who have cases that are not, you go to the court. The government is in a very difficult place, and I have pity for them because what they are doing, sometimes they misstep, they do the wrong things. So charging them with treason is just, overboard. But as I told you, do not think that there were no people who had other agenda.
There could be.
That's not exactly, not to disagree with the fact that there can be other people who have other agendas and other people who may be interested in quote-unquote sponsoring a protest. But I think the underlying cause of the protest is a discomfort, a general discomfort that Nigerians are experiencing. The general sense of not being able to make ends meet, day-to-day living.
Yeah.
So if the government has done its part, and that's not to say that even when the government is an effective government, there will not be people that would disagree with the government. I think there would always be opposition. But on the larger scale, there's a general sense of an inability to survive the current reality.
Of discontent. No, I agree with. I'm only saying that he was asking, should the government do this? We are not government. We are not privileged. We don't have enough information. But on the surface, the optics are bad for government to, charge people who were caught during a protest, charge them with treason. It's difficult to explain. But what I'm saying is that you can charge anybody, but do you have enough evidence, to convict them?
Yeah, but from what we've seen, the Nigerian government, doesn't seem to need to have evidence to get somebody arrested and keep you there as long as possible, while they look for evidence. That's not, what we've seen as being their method of approach for a long time. Previous governments, this government, it's pretty much the same thing, pretty much the same people. And then you said you feel sorry for them.
Yes, I feel
it must
sorry
be very, very tough living in that 21 billion naira house, the vice president. It must be very stressful flying that 100
million. We called the 21 billion
naira
as though it was
$100 million.
The 21 billion project was not started.
No, but
was a project Nigeria has started spending money on.
Here's the thing, man.
And
this is what. No, let me just finish. Because this is what Nigerians see, right? That make them not believe in any way, shape, or form that is justice reforms that are making things tough. The government itself has not acted in any way to support the calls for, just going through these hard times together and bearing with the reforms that have to happen. If we have government that is continuing to act like they're completely oblivious to the pain that Nigerians are dealing with, Nigeria still spent 90 billion naira sending people on for Hajj.
Well, good thing is that
Nigeria still spend, and there's no, listen, I understand the fact that they had made these plans to build the vice president's residence long ago, and so
they had even spent most of the money.
It doesn't matter. You know why?
Okay, hold on.
Because if you need to convince 200 million people that times are tough, we understand, we are with you, then they're saying things that you should not do, and it's not. The country would go on without. Will the country go on without a residence or not?
It will.
Okay, but will the country go on without spending 90 billion naira on Hajj?
On Hajj, it will go.
Will the country go on somehow, somewhere, without Mr. President buying a new jet for himself or a yacht?
Okay,
it will go on.
Let me explain to you. The country could go on, but the gains and the danger we face could be worse than you imagine. For example, let's take a look at the jet. If the president's jet is reported to have had fault once or twice, if it's reported and there's been an advice that you need to change it, and the president's plane, crashes and the president dies, like it happened in Rwanda and Burundi, hold on. You will now say the cost becomes too much for the country. So once they say that particular jet is bad, this country, for security reasons, for the safety
but you also know that
no, hold on. We cannot use that. We cannot use the jet as a basis. That's not what we really. Our country can acquire another jet for our president for the safety of the president and the presidency and the country as a whole.
Okay. Are there presidents that don't have their national carrier?
No, any president. Nigeria is more than that. We are not in the league of. Hold on, no, we are not in the league. Don't turn us.
Not in the league of who now?
No, we are not in such league. There are countries that don't have. I'm sure Ghana doesn't have.
Does the UK have its national carrier? The UK uses its Royal Air Force.
No, I can't tell you that.
No, I'm telling you, the UK uses the Royal Air Force.
I can't respond whether yes or no. What I'm saying, Nigeria has a culture already. We have a very volatile system. This is not a country that is like the United Kingdom. We are still very much behind in development. Some of these things we speak about when we compare ourselves with advanced nations. The presidents of those countries can ride a bicycle, but our president might not be able because someone might knock him off because of the discontent, the divisions. This country is very, very polarized.
Okay. That's not the citizens' problem. It's not.
That is part of all of our, because the citizens make the government. This government we are talking about are citizens.
No, Mr. Anyway, I think we spent too much time talking about this.
Just to really add to that, even the president's private jet, the quality, the durability, or whatever, a presidential jet has been questioned. But what then would your explanation be for the billions of naira that was spent for the vice presidential apartment as well as Hajj? I mean,
well, I can't. No,
I think what he's
I have
trying to
always
say,
said Hajj spending and spending on religious pilgrimages are wasteful.
Just to quickly
but
add,
politicians do it for political reasons.
And just to quickly add, right? These are just excerpts, examples. They're a much larger representation of why Nigerians will feel great discontent. Now, the truth is, regardless of which presidential candidate came into power, chances that things will still get bad are there. However, the one thing is you can't tell people to fasten their seatbelt when you are on cruise control, right? If Nigerians can't see that their government is tightening is fastening its belt and cutting down expenses as well, it's rather unfair and unkind to ask citizens to understand, because they don't see the political class understanding as well. I think that's the point that he's driving.
No, I agree with you generally, but we are picking issues, so I'm responding to the issues. Government has a responsibility to show to the people that it's as frugal and
and has it done that so far?
No, as lean. But when I say the country has spent maybe 10, 15 billion on a vice president's office or apartment, and then we want that 15 billion to go waste or stagnated because we need to complete it with 10 billion, it's not a wise decision. A wise decision is to complete it and put it
so far, in summary, you say you feel pity for the current administration.
Yes, I feel pity for them.
Do you think that they have exemplified a frugal government, a government that understands?
It's a struggle, because when you come into office and you see the kind of indebtedness, the kind of physical challenges that you have in order to be able to even run. It's just become, I became president of an association and I met empty coffers. It's not easy to stabilize the ship of an organization. You have bills to pay, you don't have the resources, your revenue are low, your commitments are great. So it's a difficult tough for the government. Let's not deceive ourselves. Nigeria squandered a lot of things in the past. And now every government is a victim. This one and the next. They will be victims.
So that means there's no hope.
There is hope, but that's why the path we are told, the government says this path will bring us to prosperity. The question is how and when we should be asking them, because it's not about whether. What they have done is difficult to protect and save the government from collapse and save our economy from collapse. That's what they told us. We want to know now. They did it in chaotic situation. They didn't allow enough measures to cushion the effect. So they took the steps, bounce all the effect on the citizens. Now they are struggling to find how to palliate. That is the problem. It's not moving fast enough. Government is too slow in responding. And that has always been the problem of this country.
Well, Mr. Akatugba, there are too many conversations that I wish that we can take. Unfortunately, we seem to be out of time. But as quickly as possible, Ali Ndume says Nigerians could end insecurity in 1 year. Do you believe that?
I disagree with him. He doesn't know. He's just talking. They say these things just to grab headlines. Insecurity in Nigeria is deeply rooted in the poverty situation, the cultural situation in the northern part of Nigeria, the openness of the border, the fact that they can't identify who is Nigerian. The problems are multifaceted, and then the Sahel, the influx of the Fulanis and all the various people coming to the country without any check. It's easy when you come to this part of the country. We are security conscious. You go to the northern part, it's an open space. Nobody checks anybody. Everyone is a Nigerian. And so these are issues. What it's telling me is just part of the normal statements to grab headlines. Not possible in 1 year.
Yeah, so what is the time frame you think that would work?
It's a long walk.
So what do you think your predictions are? Do you think that in 4 years, in 2027, we would have seen headway with the current administration and its reforms, and that by that time would have a clear, picture of where Nigeria is headed?
It would be a great political risk.
And I'm talking about with security, with the economy.
Yeah, this president would have taken the worst and the most dangerous political risk of his career, because he won't get a second term by taking this kind of reforms. If these situations continue without visible improvement, it means that
the current INEC.
Of course, INEC?
Yeah.
No, INEC does not determine our election. Nigerians do. Nigerians are the members of INEC. Nigerians, when it's time for election, is a huge bazaar. It's a trade. Even the NYC students and everyone goes to trade to look for money, not INEC.
So you trust the institution of INEC?
INEC is, elections will be conducted by primary school students. What's election? Vote and count. Nigerians just go to trade and they manipulate.
Which is a strong point, and I think
it's a whole country, a gamut of money-seeking human beings. Get somebody to come in and work as an ad hoc. He tells everybody there that, look, what can I do? What can we do together? Yeah. It's a huge, it's not INEC. What's election? Secondary school students can conduct it. Vote, we count.
I totally agree. And I think it's one of the things I'm going to be hopping on with Which Way Nigeria Today, even, that, if you don't have people who are open to being corrupt, INEC will probably not have the issues that it has. Neither would have corruption in the law courts or any other place. It is because mentally the Nigerian is open to corruption.
I agree with you, and I agree that our moral fabric has been broken.
It's broken.
It's really torn apart.
We are not even sustaining it. We are justifying it. I have met with a lot of people who had the opportunity to work with INEC, and the way they celebrate their gains. I feel cold. I've seen voters who actually prepare to go sell the vote.
So in a sense, I think that is just, again, our moral fabric being torn apart, because we see it not just with people celebrating INEC, we see it when people are lobbying for political positions because they see how very
even within the civil service lobbying for prime postings.
Yes, we need to go now. Right. We're going to break. Okay. Mr. Akatugba, thank you for joining us this morning.
It's been a pleasure.
We're going to break. Yeah. When we return from the break, more conversations coming your way this morning on Breakfast Central.
Tomorrow, the 1st of October, will once again be Nigeria's Independence Day celebration. 64 years later, and this is where we are. Now, this morning, let's take some time to focus on ourselves for a moment. As much as we love to criticize our leaders, let's take a look at ourselves. Nigerians love to claim that they are good people, a country which is filled with just good people who unfortunately have been cursed with bad leadership. Yes, you want better and sincere leaders, but are you a good person yourself? It's difficult not to identify a major flaw in ourselves as a people. The corruption we complain about in government isn't restricted to those in government alone. There's corruption in hospitals, in schools, in law courts, and almost everywhere around us. The inability to respect even something as simple as traffic laws. Yes, I know you want good leaders, but again, are you a good person yourself? Nigerians constantly bypassing their electric meters. Nigerians constantly taking bribes to cut corners. Government offices filled with bribe-seeking civil servants. INEC filled with bribe-seeking persons. And people who just find it hard to respect simple societal laws. People who would very easily sell their votes or change election figures for a few thousands. It is very difficult to imagine it is the same people who can respect simple societal laws, being the same people who are ever ready and battle ready to criticize government. But if you can't respect a simple traffic law or stop yourself from taking bribes at your small government office, what makes you different from the average corrupt politician? What convinces you that you will be better if the roles were reversed? Leaders are born from the same society as citizens. These leaders are born out of the same people, the same mentality, the same thinking, the same standards. The reason you can find hundreds or even thousands willing to overlook and support a corrupt politician is because these people see themselves in these leaders. They see a part of their personality in these leaders. When these Nigerians see corruption, they don't see something that is completely abnormal or strange. And that is why it's hard to get Nigerians in vast and majority numbers to condemn and stand up against a corrupt system. Because to a vast extent, it is who we are. Many people will do the exact same thing if they found themselves in government today. Place the average Nigerian in any government office. No, not everybody, but the average Nigerian. And they will do the exact same thing. So yes, you want good leaders, but are you a good person? The reason these politicians, or one of the reasons these politicians don't rate you, is because they know you will do the exact same thing if you were in their position. Can we truly look within ourselves and see honesty? And this is not saying all Nigerians are corrupt. But why do the corrupt ones seem to outnumber the honest ones? The reason you continue to have 40 elections is because there's always people willing and available to be bribed, from those selling their votes to the electoral officials, to the resident electoral commissioners. In the whole electoral space, there's always somebody willing to take a bribe. So again, yes, you want better leaders, but are you a good person? We must be better as a people as we celebrate 64 years. We must be better as a people if we hope to birth a better society and a better nation in the future. Happy Independence Day in advance.
Very deep, thoughtful and provoking session, monologue there by Osaogi. I think that's a question that we all need to answer. Are you a good person? Before you decide to run for office, or you want to say that you can do a much better job, are you a good person in the small capacity that you find yourself? But moving on, let's head to Edo State. Edo State Governor Godwin Obaseki has alerted the Inspector General of Police, IGP, to an alleged plot by reinstated Deputy Governor Philip Shaibu to break into Government House today, 30th September, to enforce his reinstatement. Shaibu was reinstated by an Abuja Federal High Court, but Obaseki's administration has appealed the ruling, obtaining a stay of execution. Obaseki Special Advisor Crusoe Osage warned that Shaibu's actions could lead to anarchy and requested police intervention to prevent a repeat of previous violence that resulted in a police officer's death. The Edo State House of Assembly had previously impeached Shaibu, and Obaseki inaugurated Marvelous Omobayo as his replacement. We're joined this morning by legal practitioner Dennis Osayetin. Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
All right, Mr. Osayetin, we would like to find out what the current situation is regarding the case between Philip Shaibu and the governor, Godwin Obaseki. Now, there are reports that they've obtained a stay of execution, but I can see as well another report in the papers that share that this stay of execution has been discarded or struck out by the court. So I would like you to please help us with some clarity as to what the correct position is.
Yeah, again, thank you for having me and for shedding light on this very topical issue, because you know the political situation in Edo is quite tense, and some of us as critical stakeholders, all we try to do is to encourage all the political actors to, be mindful of their actions or inactions so that we don't, make an already bad situation worse. To speak to the issue that you have raised, yes, you have correctly mentioned that a federal court in Abuja, presided over by Justice Omotosho, and indeed ruled that the Philip Shaibu should be reinstated as deputy governor. However, I'm also aware that the House of Assembly and the Edo State government have taken out a notice of appeal, and they have indeed appealed against that ruling. Beyond just appealing, they also filed a motion for injunction pending appeal. So what that means is that there is a stay on the execution of that judgment, and all parties to that judgment, to that suit, ought to wait, until the final determination of the appeal is heard. I'm also aware that there's a motion still extant, and that motion has not been heard, and that motion has not been discarded, contrary to the newspaper reports. I'm also aware that this morning, that we also heard in the news, that Mr. Philip Shaibu himself had said that he's not, he has no plans to take any action that is untoward, and he probably has demonstrated that he also wants to respect the rule of law. And the rule of law as at this morning is for all the parties to wait for the final determination of the appeal at the Court of Appeal, if need be, even the Supreme Court that has the final say on the matter.
All right. I mean, just to also shed some light, and hoping that you can help us with some clarity, the cable newspaper on the 24th of September, speaking about the said matter, says that, I'm just going to quote from the paper. It says, delivering judgment, Omotosho held that he could not grant the application for a stay of execution as he had previously given a judgment reinstating Shaibu. The court proceeded to strike out the suit and awarded $200,000 against the applicants. And, I just wanted to maybe highlight that if you have some updates regarding this, and if you can confirm this updates.
Again, I like to stick to the facts. I don't base my analysis on speculation. At this morning, I'm also seeing copies of motions from the office of Ricky Tafa SAN, stating clearly that there is a motion before the Court of Appeal or an injunction pending the hearing and termination of the appeal. And that, for me, is the extant position of the law. So every other newspaper publication, for me, is just news. It has nothing to do with the case in court. So until you see a certified true copy of the said ruling or said order, it remains in the realm of speculation. So from the records that we have seen, from the court document that we have seen this morning, there is indeed a pending appeal and a pending motion for injunction pending appeal, and all parties ought to respect the rule of law and wait until the final outcome of the matters before the Court of Appeal.
Right, we're going to come back to the legal aspect of it. Well, let's just talk generally about what the mood is like, political mood is like in Edo State currently. Of course, is plans by the Obaseki, or rather Asuegodalo team to go to the court, of course, to challenge the victory of Monday Okpebholo. To tell us about, what the mood is like politically in the state as it stands.
Yeah, the mood is that of melancholy. I'm personally touched by the brigandage, the daylight robbery, that was presided over by INEC on the 21st of September. And of course, some of us, we thought that it's going to be a golden opportunity for INEC to redeem its already battered image, starting judging from the 2023 election that they conducted and presided over. But unfortunately, INEC again disappointed a lot of us and dropped the ball. I can tell you for free that a lot of our people, especially from diaspora, young professionals like myself, have vowed never to take part in any electoral process again if the will of the people as expressed cannot be, accounted for. So why should anybody even bother to take any form to contest in any election? So what you simply do is to have INEC or federal might behind you, and you don't even need to campaign or even, sell the manifesto. At the end of the day, the people will cast their ballots, they elect the person they want, and INEC, with such, temerity, simply writes a result that does not reflect the will of the people. And that's why you see that there's general mood of sadness and misapprehension, in the state. People don't know what to expect. From what we already see on the street, there's palpable fear in the air. That these same individuals, questionable character, people who pride themselves as lions and tigers are already warming up to take over the reins of power. And you can already see even in the news is awash with incidents of indiscriminate arrests of people. Even as this morning, the police is threatening to arrest Edo people and arrest the citizens. People are even threatening that the outgoing governor is going to be arrested. So for me, this is not democracy. I don't really know what the APC, is practicing. So I am always calling on Nigerians to keep faith. I believe very strongly that the judiciary remains the hope of a common man. And I believe that the mandate that was stolen by INEC will be restored. The only time will tell.
And when you say stolen by INEC, do you have, evidence, any proof, that this was not...
Like I said, I don't just say things I don't know. I myself talking to you right now, I'm a lawyer, and I was an agent in that election. I know what I can tell you what I saw. I'm not telling you what somebody told me.
Go ahead. What are some of the things that you witnessed?
I was a world coalition agent in the last election. The people who came out in the number, yes, the numbers may not be that encouraging, but the few people who came out to vote voted for the candidate of the PDP. And INEC, right from the unit coalition to the world coalition, the magic started happening at the LGA Coalition Center, many of which were disrupted, and the wreck of Edo State started manipulating the results at the State Coalition Center. These facts are there. I left my coalition center 2 a.m. that day because when we got to the Ramat Park, if you know Benin very well, Benin Ramat Park is where you have the INEC State Secretariat. All the coalition that was supposed to take place at the LGA were disrupted, and the PDP agents and other agents of political parties were not allowed access to the coalition center. And by the break of dawn, we started seeing results that being announced, and those results clearly does not reflect even what INEC has uploaded on their IREV. So for me, what happened on this test is a clear rape on our democracy, and all well-meaning Nigerians must join Aswa Ighodalo to condemn root, stem, and branches the daylight robbery that was decided by INEC.
Mr. Osaiti, regardless of what your thoughts are, and yours is not the only, position that has said that this election was flawed by tons of irregularities.
IREV is.
We've seen
IREV, the result uploaded on IREV is.
Yes, Mr. Osaiti. We've seen many people share different standpoints and quote-unquote evidence as to why they say that the election was highly flawed and should be overturned.
Yes.
But at the end of the day,
Absolutely.
It lies in the hands of the judiciary. So what faith do you have in the courts, in Nigeria's court system, and in the judiciary to be able to grant you the results that you seek?
Just to chip in this, our faith does not only lie in the hands of the judiciary. The first remedy that was provided by the new Electoral Act is that when there is a clear case of malfeasance, there's a clear case of corruption, there's a clear case of manipulation and alteration of the results, INEC has a duty under law. They have a moral obligation under law to correct itself. And that's why we have said that INEC must take this golden opportunity to review, to investigate all this allegation and correct itself.
I hear you, Mr. Osai.
Before we now go to court or public.
I hear you, but again,
to have a judicial review. INEC has a duty under law. They have a duty under law, and that duty must be carried out.
I hear you clearly, right? But again, I'm asking, who is the one that will mandate INEC? Has INEC, first of all, admitted to seeing these irregularities? Has INEC openly admitted to that? That's one. And if INEC hasn't admitted to seeing these irregularities, where does it lie? On whose shoulder does the responsibility lie to mandate INEC to investigate itself and, quote-unquote, right these irregularities?
One of the reasons, or one of the beautiful innovations in the new Electoral Act is that there are several layers of checks, supposedly put in place by INEC, right? You have the various collation officers, you have the IREV, you have the BVAS. And from the available evidence, and facts right now in the public domain, the BVAS are clearly shown that there was manipulation. The IREV itself has shown that there was manipulation. And the PDP as a party have written to INEC to investigate this inconsistency in their own record. And INEC has a duty under law to do what is right, to Nigerians, to do justice to the Nigerians. However, if they fail, we have a remedy in law. We must now go to the tribunal to bring all this material inconsistency in their own records before the courts.
Which then goes back to the question. Which then goes back to the question that I asked you earlier. As to your trust in the judiciary. As a lawyer of over a decade in legal practice, I have absolute confidence. Even Comrade Adamu Shomole, when his mandate was stolen, some of us were on the street protesting to high heavens that his mandate be restored. So I'm still very confident that the judiciary is the last hope of the common man. And when they see the trailer load of evidence that the PDP is bringing to challenge the shenanigans presided over by INEC on 21st, the judiciary will have no choice than to do justice according to law.
Okay, and of course, also what is the general mood in Edo State currently?
Yes, like I told you, the general mood is that of apprehension. People don't know what to expect because judging from the fact that there appears to have been a lot of innovations and reforms that the outgoing government have put in place. To have a man who has now been elected, who has very questionable academic background, now being allowed to preside over our collective aspirations as a people, you know that some of us have very great apprehension. We are very scared that this man that is coming right now may not be able to manage some of these reforms, and it may end up taking Edo State 12 years backward.
Okay. I also, want to ask, let's go back to Philip Shaibu. We might come back to election, yes. But I want to ask, what happens today if Philip Shaibu does, try to, of course, get his office back and then reinstate himself, just as the courts, had initially ruled? What happens, what do you expect to happen in Benin City?
Like I told you, the matter that borders on the issue of impeachment does not start and end at the Federal High Court, right? All parties have the right to appeal all the way down to the Supreme Court. So when there's a motion for stay or there's a motion for injunction, all parties, including the tribal, ought to respect the rule of law and wait till the final.
The last ruling that we have.
However, I'm aware that the lawyers to the Edo State government and the lawyers to the Edo State House of Assembly have written to the IGP of police to alert him of the impending danger in resorting to self-help that Comrade Philip Shaibu. And I'm telling you this morning that from the news I also heard in Edo, the Philip Shaibu himself have come out to deny any such move. So which means that he understands the implication of trying to enforce the judgment by himself, that may lead to anarchy and the breakdown of law and order. So I believe that Philip Shaibu is a citizen of Nigeria, is a law-abiding citizen. He will not allow himself to be used by those who don't mean well for our state to perpetuate injustice, perpetuate violence and brigandage, or even lead to the breakdown of law and order in Edo State.
Yeah, so I want us to be clear. Yeah, I just want us to be clear because, you know, the last ruling that, you know, was reported was on the 30th of August, about a month ago.
Yes.
You know, which said, you know, of course, that the appeal court, you know, has reinstated Philip Shaibu as the Edo State governor, deputy governor, you know, after the 17th of July when Justice Omotosho gave his ruling. So, which appeal are you referring to? You know, the Obaseki team rather has put forward.
The only appeal in this matter is still pending before the Court of Appeal. Like I keep telling you, we should stop parroting.
So are you saying that, you know, the reports, you know, all over the newspapers of the ruling on the 30th of August is false?
That's why I said the only authentic source for judicial information is for you to be armed with a certified true copy of the court judgment. And I can challenge you, if you have a copy this morning that says, it's a title copy that says what you are saying now, please present it to the public. That whatever is in the news or is in the online blog, these are all fake news. I can tell you for free that there is a pending appeal for the Court of Appeal, and that appeal is yet to be determined. And in addition to that, there is a motion for injunction pending the hearing and admission of appeal that is also here to be determined by the Court of Appeal.
All right, so fingers crossed.
Anything contrary to that, they should come out and show a certified true copy of that judgment, and then we can now leave matter to rest.
All right, we can hold on to that and also wait to see what the next steps will be. So far, Philip Shaibu's team has denied, you know, the allegation, saying that, you know, it's just cheap. I can't remember the exact words, but some form of a publicity stunt. I guess that's what they're driving at. But thank you very much, Dennis Osai, for joining us on the show this morning.
Thank you very much for having me, and God bless Edo State.
Yes, indeed. All right. And as we wrap up, we are counting down the hours to Nigeria's 64th independence. And what the day would look like, we're not quite sure. But what we are sure about is we'll be back here again same time tomorrow to analyze the updates. And we're bringing you minute-by-minute updates about how it's being celebrated. And if the protest should hold, what the updates regarding that are. I'm Olive MOD. Thank you for joining us.
And I am Osaogie Ogbon. See you tomorrow.